Hello. Um, just waiting. Hope everyone is good. Hope it's been a good week. Rubbish weather, but good week. Hi, Cynthia. How are you? Um, yeah, so when Geraldine goes online, I will add her into the live and we will get started. Um, there she is. Hi.
Oh, yeah,
Hello. You're looking gorgeous as ever.
this is a nice change to Zoom calls. Let's put it that way.
Zoom calls, I feel like it's a different level of like,
I'm
there's your
done.
Zoom get up and then there's your like Insta live get up. How's your Zoom experience been? It's been a lot.
The signal's not that
Did you get me?
great.
I'm saying, how was your Zoom experience been?
Oh, it's just endless.
Oh,
It started off as fun quizzes
hopefully.
that I felt like actually Zoom's in Zoom.
It is. And it gets to a point because at the start of like lockdown, I feel like Zoom was very much like, oh, let's do Zoom parties. It's gonna be fun. Like, come. And now it's like, oh my God,
I don't want
don't.
to see it again. I know.
Literally, I'm
Because
like, I cannot wait to not have that.
yeah, even the boys have been having them like with their teachers and their friends, and like Nate's like, "I need your laptop, please." I'm like, "Excuse me." He's like, "I've got." How's my son? Honestly.
Oh my God, no. Dean says that he's like, Mummy, you spend a lot of work time on the phone. And I'm like, yeah, because we can't be in places. I can't do a meeting with people. And he's like, trying to understand it. I'm like, I am working. He's like, are you sure?
Yeah.
He's just a pest. Anyway, yeah, introduce yourself to the guys here and tell them what you do, where you're from, and what you're about.
Okay, so I'm Geraldine Onek. I am a resident in Lancaster, but I'm actually was a refugee who came from now is now in South Sudan when I was two. I came here when I was two because my dad got a scholarship. So I've actually lived in Lancaster for 33 years, but I have left and then come back. And the reason I left is because I'm actually a primary school teacher by trade, if you want to call it that. And so I went to London to try and get like an experience of what teaching inner city multicultural areas was like, because my only other experience was in Lancashire. So I wanted to, so I ended up staying 7 years there and having two of my
Mm.
boys down there as well. So yeah, but at the moment I'm bringing up my three boys, um, stay at home mum, and yeah, during COVID, that's very interesting. So
Doing the good Lord's work. Every time I see your Instagram story, and it's literally when I like woke up, I'm like, yeah, I'm going to bed.
it is literally like
But
each day you just got to, it's survival, isn't it?
it's a lot. Like I honestly commend you. Like I have one, and you have three, and I'm like,
I
one's
know.
enough. Like that's too much right now. But you did really well, so kudos to you, and be proud of the hard work you're doing. Because aside from being a mom and teaching or whatever, you have taken on a lot of the Black Lives Matter stuff within Lancaster, and you've took quite a big role in it.
Yeah,
So,
but that actually came
yeah.
out accidental, if you want to call it that. Um,
Mhm.
Let me just paint a picture. Lancaster's like predominantly white city, so when we came here, there was very few black families. A lot of them were students who'd come from overseas with their families. And so when the vigil for George Floyd got announced in the paper, I said to my sister, "Oh, we should go." You know, being a few of the Black people in Lancaster, I said, "This is, you know, we've got to show solidarity." And the fact that even there even was a vigil in Lancaster, with it being such a small town compared to like Manchester and London, we went along like not really knowing who was actually going to turn up, because I'm not being funny. We know basically all the Black people in Lancaster,
Yeah.
and that enough would have made it, you know, had that momentum. But when I rocked up, honestly, it was so overwhelming to see so many supporters, and they were young, they were predominantly white, you know, they had their placards. My sister ended up speaking on the steps, you know, and saying this amazing speech from the heart. And I actually ended up getting interviewed as a result of that about my experience as racism, because I think for a lot of Lancastrians, you know, they deny racism is apparent because it's not, what's the word, overt, it's not in your face, it's not graffiti in town, it's not that. And until you're that person, you can't, you know, say that racism doesn't happen. These are white people who are saying that racism was happening. I was like, I'm telling you, mate, it did happen, and it is happening. Like, so from that, a close friend of mine was just like, right, you know, people are listening, let's make something of this. So we set up this group called Lancaster Black History Group, to tackle a lot of issues like, you know, racism in Lancaster, for instance, but also Lancaster is actually a city where slave trade happened, and we've got a lot of connections, you know, where we found out we're the fourth largest port during the slave trade.
Wow.
So all this information about our history is coming out, and the more we dig, and we're calling it Lancaster's hidden history, because a lot of Lancastrians, people who've lived here like decades, who were born here, generations, you know, had grandchildren, were unaware of things like street names that we walk down every day were named after slave owners, you know, but they passed themselves off as merchants. So it's from that where we've met with council, we've, you know, challenged them about things like this, like what they're going to do about it, to acknowledge that, you know, our involvement in the slave trade, and also to honour those who died. There is like a monument in Lancaster, but it's just so hidden away. It's like on the quay. So I don't know if people know, Lancaster is actually well known for the witches, the Pendle witches. So a lot of our tourism, if people come to the castle, they go to Williamson's Park. So, you know, that needs to be included. You know, when people come here, they need to know, did you know, like, but because of the location, people wouldn't, you know, necessarily go to that direction. So that's what we're trying to get, like, make it into a talking tourism point. And so we're working with, there's a professor called Alan Rice, who actually made a slave trail of all the key points in Lancaster where significant events happened or people lived, and he's updated it recently. And we want to make it interactive for young children. So been working with a secondary school teacher, and he's going to make an app, you know, something that's to their level. You know, kids these days, they don't want, I remember field trips, you know, your clipboard and your pencil, and you'd be like, right, go and answer these questions, walk around. Like, kids these days are like, oh, you know, it's dull. They need something that's, you know, part of their generation. So phones, everyone's got a phone these days. An app is that kind of interaction that we need to access. So these are the exciting things which are happening. But there's so much which I'll obviously tell you more about when, you know.
That sounds really good. That's it's weird because obviously, like, we know each other from being in Lancaster, and it has been one of those things of, since you guys have been doing all this stuff and whatever, it's been more like, wow, like, I didn't realize Lancaster was that involved. And it's a good idea that you're making it a thing of the history just being taught, because I think a lot of people forget that when we're saying that we want these things either taken down or we want them recognized that they're there, a lot of people will then think that we just want them eradicated. And I'm like, well, if they're going to be there, let them be there and have presence and let people know that's what they did. Not just to be there, just to be there, and we'll just celebrate that that's the hidden fact of what it is.
Yeah. When like we think about it, and like, you want change, I think that's one of the barriers that has come across. A lot of people are seeing us coming saying, well, I've always known that place as da 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 da. I'm like, that's good. And we looked at changing the street names, but knowing how many streets were actually named, we looked at the cost of it. So just to name one street and change that name would cost £30,000. And first of all, you'd have to get 2/3 of the residents, as in the ones who own the house, to agree. So even if you didn't have that, you wouldn't be able to proceed. So we thought, why don't we just channel our efforts and energy in a different direction? So we suggested, we do want to make it learning point. Why don't we put plaques next to those street names, giving more details? You know, so you do go to Lindo Square, for example, and they said, oh, did you actually know William Lindo was a slave owner and he actually lived here and he had a slave called John Chance? That, you wouldn't get that normally because you just be like, oh, I'm just going to Lindo Square. You know, the Gregson in Lancaster, all these key areas in Lancaster, people can't deny it now. You know, it's there in black and white. Historians have found it. It's getting written up. And even this pub in Lancaster called the Robert Gillow, they took it on their own like stance to actually change their name, you know, as a result of this, because it came out that Gillow was a slave owner. And they were unaware of it, and they even said we were ignorant to it, and they put a board outside their pub saying that they Black Lives Matter, we are allies, and that was like so heartwarming. That came from, you know, they're in an independent pub, and for them to do such a big gesture like that was amazing, and it got a lot of you know, praise from the community. So yeah, I feel people do want change and people are listening. So it's just
that's really good.
Yeah,
it's good that you've like made changes, and it's good that you're actually getting somewhere, because it's quite hard when you're in a small town to kind of be heard and be present. So at least those little changes do mean a lot, and they do make a big difference to people's output into society. So that's good.
It helps. Sorry, I was going to say,
no, it's okay.
like, we've got the council on our side. I think that's where you have to get in, because end of the day, all the decisions being made has to come from them. In terms of money, we're applying for funding. You know, there's a lot of funds out there specifically for people of colour to lead projects like this. So we're using what's out there to help us. So
good. I'm proud of you. Keep up the hard work. You're doing really well. So obviously you came to the UK when you were quite young. So you won't really have much like memories of back home. But how have you found it just being in Lancaster and being like a Black person there? Because even when I was there, I don't think I noticed. I think our families did well to kind of keep us together and keep us whatever. Like, we knew that we were Black and we were like, there wasn't many of us. But I don't think I actually had a realization of that until I got to Scotland.
And you saw in comparison. And I think that's until you don't know any better until you go elsewhere. And it was when we went to visit cousins in Manchester, and we saw there was a massive Sudanese community there. Not just Black people, there was a Sudanese community. Whereas in Lancaster, you have a collective of different nationalities, because, you know, even when we came here, I think we were one of the few Sudanese families here. But Lancaster became a city of sanctuary. And so it meant that refugees who came to the UK could come and live in our city. And as a result, we have had an increase of Sudanese families living here. And my mum's been able to meet them, and she's made friends with them, and, you know, they're part of the community now. So I feel I've had nothing to compare with directly, but it was when I did go on placement to London, and I went to Newham, and Newham's well known for being multicultural, very diverse, inclusive as well. So a lot of the primary schools had children from different backgrounds and different abilities, and it was eye-opening, and it was refreshing, because for once I wasn't the minority. Like, my friends who were teachers as well, who were white, they were like, everyone thinks we're Polish. And like I said, now you know how I feel, you know, like the tables had turned, and you know, I think I needed that. I think I needed to feel not all eyes were on me for once. It was a bit like I can just do my job. You know, I don't have to prove my worth. I don't have to be that token person. And even my mentor was a black woman, and you know that I think helped me because in the end, I was like in my head, I was like, I'm only going to go down for a couple of years. That's what I said to my mum. I ended up making it my home for like 7 to 10 years, and I had 2 of my boys down there, and I did love living down there. And it was only when we started having a family, I realised Lancaster for me is where I wanted to be. I wanted to be closer to my own parents, but I was very aware I was taking my boys back to a place where they weren't going to be, one of the majority, to call it. So we had to think about things like that, like schools. So you know what Lancaster's like. You know, even myself, when I went to school, like what am I now, 35? So when I was 31 years ago, I was the only black child in my primary school, and there was like, how many children? About 500 children. And then my sister came along, so there's 2 of us. And, same at secondary school, only black child. And then my sister came along, and that was 800 girls, an all-girls school as well. So I feel I've just made the best of the situation, and I think a lot of my friends are white as well, because of where I live and where I've grown up. But at the same time, I do want to also experience being in a community where it is diverse.
Yeah. I think that's the one big thing that I've got to a point where I don't think I'm going to spend the rest of my life in Scotland. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And it's more in the fact of yes, the community is bigger than what it could be in certain cities, from what it was in Lancaster and that. But the difference of when you go down south and there's a bigger community and you don't feel as much pressure just going about your daily life. You don't feel all eyes are on you just doing day-to-day things. You don't feel there's expectations of how you should and shouldn't be behaving. It's just you can do you so freely. And then even that with having a child, I'm like, I would rather him be in an environment that he is normal.
Yeah.
And instead of him being the only one, there is maybe between 10 and 20 kids that look like him, and those kind of things. And it's really hard. So how do you find, have you had any worries about your kids being in schools in Lancaster? Has there been any interactions?
So my son when we moved up, Nate was just about the age where you have to apply for primary school. So we came up, we rented somewhere, and then obviously, location is key to what school place you get. And I hadn't obviously lived in Lancaster for a while, but what I knew was this particular school was very diverse in comparison to the rest of Lancaster, because it was in the middle of a big Asian community. So I knew straight away my child wouldn't be, in my head, naively, I thought they're not going to experience racism there because, there are other people of colour there. And the thing is, he actually didn't experience racism, but I felt they didn't deal with diversity and culture as best as they could. There were so many opportunities. I think once I've been taught in London, I was like, why don't we do this up here? Why don't we, embrace the community? Why don't we get the parents coming in to teach them about their culture, read stories, celebrate the days that they celebrate, like Eid and Guru Nanak birthday? Why don't we do that? Why does it need to have those children of those beliefs to be in those schools in order to do it? And it was frustrating because I was like, there's me I've sent my child to this school thinking, right, what they're going to do for, this is coming up. Nothing. And when we moved, we bought a house in Bartlett Sands, and I was, no joke, I don't want to move in because Bartlett Sands is a village. So imagine Lancaster City as it is.
It's a village.
It's not, but in comparison, we're then in an even remote area, and it is all white. And when I started dating Joe, I used to come here and like stay because this is his family home that we bought from his mum. And I was aware that I was the only person of color. You know, it's like, are you local? That kind of like, are you, you know, people looking at me like, should you be around here? Are you lost?
Yeah.
And the more I visited, the more familiar people became with me. And when we moved here, I was like, Joe, no, I'm going to do that journey. And I didn't even drive. So imagine I'd get up really early with the boys, get on a bus with them, 2 buses, get him to school. We're always early because it was either be early or be late, you know. So we were always the first in the playground. And then I was heavily pregnant and I was just being stubborn. And Joe's like, why are you doing this? Why don't we just move him to village school? Go and have a look around. And it was my prejudice. I think I was just like, oh, village, it's, you know. And I walked to and Joe went to that school years ago. Now he's like 42. But like, I walked around and there is some children of colour, you know, and I was a bit more relaxed because I didn't want my child to be the only child of colour in that school because I thought that drew attention to him. And you know what? He's been the happiest that he, you know, I think I should have done it sooner. I think it was my apprehensions which were stopping him. The mums have accepted me and welcomed me. I felt so, you know, bit more of this community than I did at his previous school. You know, like I went through things in my personal life and I'd known them a short time, yet they all rallied up behind me and helped me. And I think sometimes you need to not always be so cautious, and actually sometimes what we think is not the best situation tends to be. So,
but you're also trying to protect your kids, and it comes from how like you got treated when you were younger, and it comes from how we've been treated, and it's one of those things of when you realize that you're about to have like intergenerational trauma, you're like, oh, I need to stop before I pass that. And I need to not think that way because times have changed, not as much as what they should, but like they have eventually, and it's a worry. But I also think like counteracting that, people don't think that as parents of like kids of color or anything, like we have to think about how are they going to be accepted, how are they going to learn, how are we going to be accepted as their parent. Like there's so many different technicalities to it apart from that kid just going to get an education. And it's also another thing of like, will I have to then
especially
do a
with the
education at
boys.
home? Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
And that's
especially
another
we
thing.
have boys. We have boys, black boys and mixed race boys are more likely to fail by the education system, be expelled, or, you know, so like I just feel you want the best for them. You want to give them the best start. I don't want my sons to become a statistic. I want them to excel. I don't want them to be, I don't want, and I think this is the issue, like you have to pre-warn them, you are going to get treated differently. You know, there are going to be teachers, employers, who will have, you know, the systematic racism, as much as people are in denial about it, it does exist, you know, like looking back now when you reflect, you think, oh yeah, I did get a bit, you know, that teacher was very hard on me. Why was that the case? And, you know, thinking like I worked hard, but then I feel with boys, it's a different kettle of fish as well. And then you just like put your head down.
I'd seen this picture, and it was this little like mixed race boy, and it's one of those things that with mixed race boys it is hard, or just mixed race kids in general, because they are generally an accessory to some people. And it was a picture of this little mixed race boy, and it was like, when do I stop becoming cute and become a thug?
Yeah.
And it is literally that they'll wake up one day and it's just that's it, like their life changed.
And
it's so scary.
And you think, this is the thing I've always found difficult with my boys. I've tried to not expose them. I've tried to give them experience of both African culture and their British culture. And it's with Nate, he'll sometimes say things like, he really sees himself like, I want to be white, you know, and he'll say these statements, and you don't want to say that's a bad thing because his dad's white. And that's why I always go, oh, why do you want to be white? And his logic is, well, Daddy's the only white one in our family, so it's not fair, you know. And
Oh.
he's brown, and that's closer to my skin tone. But it is like he doesn't see it yet. He doesn't see his color until it's like when they have to do a self-portrait, for example, at school, and then he's realizing, oh, I've got to use different colors to my picture compared to the rest of his table, for example.
Did school even provide his color though? Because I remember being in school and you got told to make your color, and they gave you like the little palette of skins, and you kind of got the black and the grey and blended it in until it made your color.
Yeah. I know. I remember it's like someone goes to me, "You're black." I'm not black. I do have a light shade. Do you know what I mean? And it was literally like everyone's there with their peaches and whatnot, and you're like, "Oh, okay." And this is it. Like, this is when I try and tell people that was white privilege. The fact that you had everything, the resources were catered for you from day dot. You didn't even have to think about it. You just rocked up. Whereas we're like, oh, they're going to have my, you know, even like skin color types and, you know, anything uniform wise. And you're thinking, you know, are they going to have it for my skin tone? And so.
And it goes so far in like as much as there is, it's like that's in the education and like whatever, but it's even like when they do sports or things like that, like say it was like a girl and she was dancing and you've got to wear like the nude coloured glittery things, and it's like, well, that won't be my nude, it's going to be someone else's nude, and it's constant. And even when you go into adulthood, it then turns into, so I want my makeup done, but will they have my tone? And the amount of times I will go and get my makeup done and I have my own foundation because I'm like, I know they won't have it, and it's like, why am I paying her 40 odd quid for something I'm providing?
And like, I think when my friends get makeup, like their makeup done for like if we're going to weddings and stuff, I'm like, I'm not even bothering because I'm yet to find someone. I don't care if they're white or black, someone who can do black makeup, you know, and do it well, because our skin tone varies, and I think people just paint us as one, you know, color. And like even myself, I'm still experimenting, finding the right skin tone, and then I find one and then it gets discontinued because not many people are buying it, you know, because Sudanese people are known for being so black, and that is our distinguishing feature, you know. And like, I've been on holiday in Singapore and someone's like, you're from Sudan, aren't you? And I'm like, yeah, you know, and because of my complexion, I'm proud of it. And I think you can go into the whole like shadeism thing, you know, like, because you try and get accepted in society. And then when I did go to London, I experienced shadeism, you know, and I never experienced it before because there wasn't black people to on me. And then there was people looking at me and like, you know, sniggering. And these people were people who were black, you know, who considered themselves better than me because their skin was lighter, more desirable, more Beyonce color. And I've never I've been fortunate that my mom has always instilled in us, your skin's beautiful, do not bleach it. And I've got aunties back at home who are, you know, have got side effects because of bleaching, and I'm like, that's put me off for life.
It's a very scary thing, and I think that's the one threat that our mothers have always used of like, look at auntie back home, like that's what's gonna happen to you. And literally, like that, your mum will actually show them that this was like 10 years ago. Like,
but they would only put on the parts that they could have like would be seen, so their torso would be and then because they couldn't afford to put it on everywhere, the arms would just be like, oh, I'm gonna have my arm. And I was just like, wow. Like the fact that
there's a documentary on Netflix about it, and it's called Skin. It's based in Nigeria, and it's about like the different stages of like the skin bleaching industry and stuff. People should actually watch it. And it's got Bob Risky on it, and he's basically talking about how he's made all his money from skin bleaching. And he's like, if you're bleached, you have money. If you're bleached, you have this. And I'm like, people are still stuck in that mentality, and it goes back to racism, and it is taught to us. And that's the worst thing of like, look at how much they have turned us against ourselves, and look at how much they have managed to mind warp us that much to then be like, okay, so I am closer to their skin tone, so I'm going to do better in life, and I'm going to be successful. And if you're dark, you're in the gutter. And that's just where you get left.
Those racists, they'll treat you just as like me, you know. They don't care that you're 2 skin tones lighter than me. They're like, black is black in their eyes. The KKK don't care. Do they?
The
Honestly.
case of you don't care, please don't care, no one cares. Like, even if you go to the doctors and you tell them about your skin bleaching, they're gonna be like,
Yeah.
and then like,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? They're gonna be back. It's the craziest industry, like, and it gets me so like. Sometimes I get annoyed and I get like, it's it's so much money in it, and I'm like, but then look at the fake tan industry.
Yeah.
They are making
That's
the
the
same
flip
amount of money by
side.
selling the opposite concept,
Yeah.
and I don't get how they're getting away with it.
They tried to ban it, didn't they, recently? But they've just relabeled it as a different product. Um, in
But
Africa,
the skin bleach.
I think the biggest market, to be honest. I think
Mm-hmm.
here it's not really, and that's the other thing with like having access for me, like hair shops. Where do I go to get
Mm-hmm.
my hair done? Like there are a few shops now, and it's because people have found a niche market, and they've started their own salons, and but then at the same time these aunties are then like jacking up the price. They're like, well, you're going to go to Manchester, get the train to Manchester or London. So, but yeah.
That's why I learned how to do my own hair. My mum, I'm so glad she made me learn. Like,
That's one
my
thing
mum made sure me and my sisters made us learn. I'm so glad.
I'm an embarrassment to Angela. All her daughters done. Actually, my sister's learnt off YouTube. I'm the only one. But then I need to do Seb's, to be honest. Seb's hair's afro. This is the other thing. Like,
His
having
hair's so
those
cute.
kids, their hair
Huh?
texture is so different. So I've got Seb, who's got afro. Nate, who's got quite Caucasian hair, but it's curly still.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just like I'm I'm learning, because
Hmm.
you don't think, oh, when I grow up, I'm gonna have a mixed race child, I'm gonna have a black child. You just have your child. But I'm learning as a parent as well, like the products to put in their hair because it's not the exact same as mine, and
Hmm.
stuff like that.
And that's one thing I've had to learn. Of like at first when I was doing Dean's hair, I was very much like, I'm just gonna use the same as mine. It's fine. That's it. Whatever. And then I learned. I was like, actually, this is too heavy. Like my hair's closer than his. I can't do that. And it's that balance. But then it's also then because me and his dad aren't together, it's then having to go around to his father's family and be like, right, so you can't use this on his hair.
Yeah,
So this is what to do. And there's times like he used to have his hair quite long, and there was times I would literally go to his house and be like, this is before shower, this is after shower, this is after shower, this is the morning one. And I'd have like my little products and be like, so
yeah,
when you braid it, you do this. And I was like, I felt like a YouTube girl. But I
yeah,
was like, if I don't do it, I can't then be annoyed at them for not doing it.
yeah. But Joe is very, and this is one thing. Like I know you said before, like how um, as an interracial couple and a family, like Joe's had to learn, his child is going to get treated differently. He needs to know how to look after his child's hair. He needs to know what products to buy. And he does all his own research. He goes to Boots, he knows, and because I feel like it's got to be both of us, like you said, because there's no
Mm-hmm.
point just putting on the black parent, putting the ownership on
Yeah.
the black parent. I said, and like when Joe and I talked about having kids, I think he was aware. He wasn't naive in thinking, "Oh, our boys are going to have a nice, easy life," and he was very aware that they were going to be. They will experience racism at some point in their life,
Mm-hmm.
and it just you have to have that open discussion, and you've got to have that. You've got to be on the same playing field. Otherwise, parenting is going to be such a difficult place to go. But I know we've sometimes come to disagreements, like this whole Black Lives Matter movement. I've been very, like you said, projected into the limelight per se in Lancaster, and he was worried, for our boys because we're here living our little quiet life, and then there's me like, hey, these are my three mixed race boys, and there are unfortunately racists in Lancaster, and
Yeah.
this is, if anything, they've come out of their woodwork. Like only after the vigil, about a week later, on social media, um, three grown men on their lunch break reenacted the George Floyd um, leg on the neck in the middle
In
of town
Lancaster.
in Lancaster at the outside the town hall.
Yeah.
They did it there in broad daylight, not even like, on a night out, like stumbling.
Mm.
They then took a picture, uploaded it onto their social media, but not just like in a folder as their background picture. And
Wow.
then their someone shared it, so it's like it's going to become viral. Like, does anyone know these men? They work at this place in Lancaster, and they did get fired because no one wants to be associated with people who do that. And it's trying to get people to understand that is a hate crime. So actually, next week I'm meeting with the hate crime officer for this area, because I think there's a difference between banter, there's a difference between racism, and there's a difference between a hate crime. And I think we need to unpick those terms. And talking like from some students at Lancaster University, there's no proper protocols in place. So it's people finding, if you experience racism, whether it's from a fellow student or someone senior, because it does happen where they just say a slur, racial slur, and it makes you feel uncomfortable. Do you know what protocol to go to? Is there someone, like, like we have safeguarding officers and there's an allocated person in a workplace? We don't have a race officer, or HR sometimes aren't the ideal person to go to. So it's trying to get every organisation, schools, council, universities, to reflect and look, actually, what do we have in place if this happens? Because it clearly does happen. Because this Lancaster Uni student actually did a survey and did their own research. But yeah. So
how have you found, like, just on the teaching side of things, how have you found it being like a Black teacher? Because I feel like everyone talks about their school experience, but you've gone back into school. So how have you found that?
Yeah, so one of the key reasons I actually became a teacher is because I didn't see Black teachers. And you could argue, oh, well, you were brought up in a white area, like you can't, that's to be expected. But why is it to be expected? Like, you don't teach just the people that look like you. So there's another Black girl on the course, and I think there was over 500 teachers on my course at uni. And one thing I found is you can use it to your advantage, because there's not many people like you. Use that positive discrimination where you're standing out. And I found that when I came back to Lancaster and I was having to do supply work, all of a sudden people were asking for me by name, because they're like, oh, we want her, because it makes their school look good. Look, we've got a Black teacher, look at us. And it is, they're doing it to tick off, like, we have diverse staff, tick. But I've also had to then teach children, because they don't see Black people. One of my first placements, I remember walking in, already nervous. I'm a first year student, went to Blackpool, and there was about 3 or 4 of us based in the school, and I walked in, and I've never been stared at so much in my life. All these 30 eyes looking at me like gawping, and I was like, any questions? I thought, let's get it out. And this one boy's like, oh, how long did it take to put your makeup on? I didn't have makeup on. They literally thought my skin was makeup. And I said, what do you mean? And he goes, this. And I said, this is skin. And I literally went, come and touch me, come and see, look. And they were like, I had to get, that it was ignorance, but it was also a teaching tool, because they needed to know we exist. And I think if you live in and this is how racism happens, if you do not teach Black histories in the curriculum, if you do not expose children to Black people in different areas, like not just when you're learning about slave trade, show them famous Black people who are not just singers, show them famous Black athletes and lawyers and inventors, and it's just trying to get them to see, like, it shouldn't be a shock, it should be the norm. Do you know what I mean? It's like, Black people exist, yes, not in your immediate environment, but just because something's not in direct view to you doesn't mean its existence doesn't happen. Yeah.
that would baffle me, I think. Yeah, that would be a lot. Because even like, I've noticed that going to the park is a big thing.
Yeah.
Just basically when you go anywhere with your kids and you go into like Because like where I stay, I'm literally like on borderline of like a really poncy, like high predominantly white area. But they
Yeah.
have a really good kids cafe, so I go in it all the time. And now that I go in it quite a lot, like people look at me like they're fine with it. But at the start, like the little kids, like you would see them dropping their food there.
Yeah.
Just watching me and Dean, and like every time Dean would go and play with them, you'd see the kids be a bit reluctant. And I'm like, you're under 5, and
Yeah.
you already have that in your mindset of this. They don't know who the person is. They don't know if it's normal because he's darker skinned. And I remember there was one little kid, and like it was like the kid must have been like the same age as Dean, and like Dean was playing, and like she was literally crawling about his head, picking at him, and like touching his hair. And do you know when you're like, I can't cuss someone out that's under the age of 5,
But what is the
like,
parent doing? This is my issue, right? Kids we can excuse because of age, because of ignorance, because of experience. Parents, you have a duty, and this is what I'm calling people out. I said teachers can only do so much, right? And I'm a teacher and a parent, and I make it my sole responsibility to educate my children that there are people of different skin tones. Just because you don't see them, and what do you do? How are you going to treat them? You're like, how would you like it if someone treated you? Da, da, da. Put themselves, and getting books like Nate's books. He's got a range of books with different characters with different skin tones. Not always a white girl, not always a white boy. His aunties and uncles got books made where he was the main character, and he loved it. So I just feel like, for example, the other day I said to my sister, I went to town. I don't go to town often, and especially with COVID, but I was like, I was child free, and I went in, and literally I was in town for 1 hour, right? Primark, got some food, sat in the park and just ate it. In that hour, 2 separate kids stared at me, yes, with my mask on, and said, ugh. Different incidents, they didn't know each other, different parts of my visit into town. And I was just like, the thing is, I didn't react because I don't want them to, if they're already thinking, then if I look at them, I don't want to give them a bad impression of black people, like, oh, she was scary as well. But I did look at the parent, and I remember one of the mums said, what are you saying at? And then the girl pointed like, in my direction.
with taste.
And I don't know whether the mum was embarrassed, whatever. She just pulled her away and didn't even say, oh, I'm really sorry. There's none of that. Like, she didn't say, oh, no, you don't say that. Why are you saying that? Why are you saying, what's wrong? And I was just a bit like shocked that the parent, that child now thinks what she had said was acceptable because it hadn't been corrected. Like, if Nate had said that to someone, like someone he probably, for example, in a wheelchair, like, oh, because it's something different, I would be like, Nate, why would you say that? First of all, that person is a person. Yes, they are in a wheelchair. That's because they're not able to walk, and that's the right. You as uncomfortable as it makes you feel. Imagine how it makes the person experience it. Like everyone's like, oh, is racism making you feel hearing about it? Like, imagine how the people experiencing it are feeling, and I feel like sometimes people have to just ignore their how uncomfortable they are and just face the teaching point.
Yeah, pretty much. Like, I remember when we were younger, and like me and my sisters, you did the supermarket shop with your mum, and like you get the little kids in the trolleys that go up at you.
Yeah.
And we used to like play games with it so you can give the kids the biggest fright. Like, we were naughty. It's a coping mechanism because it's one of those things, if you get so fed up of being gawped at and looked at like you're in the zoo, so you just like, you know what, let's make fun of it. And I remember my mum used to get so annoyed at us, but we would literally be like making faces at them, and like we would like jump at them and just like stupid stuff. But it's effective. If you're gonna look at me like that, I'm gonna give you a reason to look at me.
Yeah. There's
no point.
William's in this group, but he won't know this. When he was younger, we went to Tammy Girl, and he must have been about 5, and a girl was gawping at him, and he'd had enough, and he punched her, and she started and goes to her mum, and then my mum turns around like, what's going on? And then the mum was like, obviously like, what's happened? And then my mum's like, oh, I think, and she's like, William, what did you do? And he goes, I hit her. And he goes, my mum's like, why did you hit her? He goes, because she was staring at me. And like the thing is, if anyone knows my mum, she would probably behind curtains like good, you know, like good for you.
Yeah.
She's like, we
She'll be
don't,
like, good man.
yeah, we don't do that. And my mum used to always, my mum did instill in us actually, fight your battles. If someone, you know, but you also need to realize you don't want to be that stereotypical angry black girl. And that's why I think I kept my head down. I experienced racism at school, both at primary and secondary school. But if I fought against it, or if I challenged them, or if I became in an argument, then I would come off worse. So it was better just to like just put your head down, just get on with it. And but yeah, but I remember stories came back
You
to me
get stuck in those two sides of like, do I say something, do I not? And it's one of those, even like in my school, like my sisters were the two oldest black girls in the school. Then I came, and then it was kind of like, so when I joined, Sandrine left, so it was kind of like there was another two, so it was me and Nikita.
Yeah.
And then there was literally like, that was it. There was a couple of boys, but they kind of came once we were like in the later stage of high school, so it's around about 15, 16, and
Yeah.
then more girls came, and it was kind of like we have done the nitty gritty. We have like kind of based
Yeah.
the treatment you're getting now, and we have had to deal with the brunt of it of being like the first people and whatever. And then
Yeah.
it's one of those things, if you get to a point of like, do I defend myself or not? And me, I got to the point I was like, nah, but this is not running. I'm not. It's happening. I was like, I can't do this. But now I'm kind of glad, because as soon as I reacted, it stopped.
Yeah.
And no one did anything, because they were kind of like, well, if that's what we're going to get, then we're not going to do anything about it. And it's one of those things of like, I feel like people got put in a case of that, okay, we do it, and it's like that fear of like, if we do it, what's going to happen, what's the reaction to it.
Yeah.
It's like, I also don't want to have to put fear in people. Like, I don't like, you don't want anything. It shouldn't be a thing. And it
Yeah.
also shouldn't be that worry of like, should I have to, as a collective, look after the 6 black people that are here?
Yeah.
And yeah, it's a difficult place to be in. I'm trying to think what else. Yeah. So how does so we've got about what, 10 minutes left.
Yeah.
How does Joe find it? How do you think he has adapted to things, and how have you guys spoke to the boys about what's going on in the world now as a family?
Nate's quite switched on, like he's quite sensitive, so he knows change and if things are happening, and you know, like he does watch news and things like that. We've not explicitly like sat them down and said, look, this is happening, da da da, because I think with COVID and everything, they're already struggling with the change, not being in school, but at the same time, Nate will be exposed to those stories and explanations and those serious conversations, unfortunately. I just find no parent wants to do it, but as parents of black mixed children, you have no choice. And I remember my mum saying, because you know, my mum came from a village in South Sudan, you know, and she brought her kids to this country for a better life. That was how it was sold to her. That's how what my dad said, the kids are going to have a better life. And we just used education to get us through. We're like, you know what? If we can't have anything, let's just get a good education behind us and we'll do well, whatever happens. You're going to experience racism, and in the workplace, in every aspect of your life, you know. I'm fortunate now. I've lived in the village for a couple of years now. I know the people in the spa. They know me by name. They get my basket for me. When I was heavily pregnant, they were like offering to bring it to my house for me. You know, a couple of years before that, there wasn't even a black person in the village. So I just think we've got to not label all white people. And I think this is what people worry about. And when I say things about racism and white privilege and that, everyone's like, oh, I said, this is not anti-white. I'm not against anti-white. Like I said to you, I'm going to say that thing. I've got white friends. You know, I've got lots of white. Actually, my black cousins mock me for having so many white friends. They're like, yeah. I said, but when I grew up in a place, I make friends with who are there. You know, And these are the people who have supported me in everything I've done. You know, even this whole Black Lives movement, you've seen who your true friends are, and it's
Yeah.
actually made me question some friendships. And I have cut out people who have said
Mm.
some questionable things, let's put it that way. You know, sharing absolute rubbish, all lives matter. And I'm like, are you actually kidding me? Like,
Mm.
do I not mean anything to you? Like, you know, you're thinking like, I've not put on a, this is not a shock. My skin color has always been black. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
it's not like I've lured him into false, like, as in like, oh, be my friend. This has been me from day dot. I've been true to myself. And then for people to now share things, and I think when it was things where people were like blaming the protests for an increase in cases of COVID, and
Mm-hmm.
I think that was people hiding their racism behind, you know. I said, just say what you want to actually say, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and using pronouns like them. When is it become us and them? And it's when it's language like that where you have to be careful, because a
Mm-hmm.
lot of those NHS workers are people from the BAME community, you know. Even
Mm-hmm.
my uncle's a doctor, you know, in Edinburgh hospital. So for people to then question why we're doing the Black Lives Matter protest, we were they weren't showing that same concern to those people on Brighton Beach when it's packed, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and they weren't showing that same concern when the pubs open, and they weren't showing. And I just feel, yeah, you know what I mean? Like, I just feel like you just have to just question everything.
Do you think that I think it's quite a good example of, obviously we are in a pandemic and there is this bigger racial pandemic going on. Do you
Yeah.
think that what has happened with the new lockdown requirements that have been put in place from like the likes like Manchester, Bradford and stuff, do you think that has anything to do with BAME community festivities?
Completely. Like, my friend came round the next day and we were talking about it, and she's like, I hadn't clocked on. She went, "Do you not find it funny that they did it the eve of Eid, like literally
Mm-hmm.
midnight?" And I was just like, "Oh my God, yeah." And if anyone knows Eid, Eid is the Muslims' equivalent to Christmas. They've been
Yeah.
preparing for this for weeks. Food,
They fasted.
they,
They have done
this
so
is
much.
this is a calendar. It can't be changed. It can't be like, oh, we'll do it next week. Would you change Jesus's birthday to next week because you're in lockdown? No, that date is significant. You know, it's
Mm-hmm.
to celebrate the end of Ramadan. So for them to do that, but then still allow pubs, um, people to meet in pubs, people to, I just found it very undermining of the multicultural society we're supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I
Yeah.
feel it could have been dealt better, like you said, in those key areas where there is a big um, Muslim community. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I just feel it was, and like, even what was that Conservative councillor who blamed the BAME people? We're to blame for COVID, the influence.
Yeah.
And I was just like, how can you say a statement like that with no proof? Where's your proof? You know, and
I know.
I just find those statements are dangerous because you're just dividing people even further, and to blame a whole, not even an ethnicity group, a group of ethnicity groups
Mm-hmm.
on something that is so much complicated is
Yeah.
very irresponsible.
I think one of the harshest things about that was the whole thing was bloody harsh anyway, but it was the fact that when you looked at well, one, the time that they released this, it was at midnight. Like it was literally, they were looking to get people in trouble because the
Yeah.
people might not have known. People could be
No,
traveling to go see their families. Like
exactly.
so many
Yeah.
people could be doing anything. So by the time people had got to places, there you go. There's a fine. Why are
Yeah.
you here? And then there was also the fact that they had people like that were obviously Muslim, so they put women in hijabs and like people
Yeah.
like in burqas and stuff like that on the pictures. So they would have like new lockdown things, and then it would have like a Muslim person in the picture. It's like you're planting the seed, like you're already portraying that image, and then they're saying this, and it's one of those things that it's like when you look back to the whole George Floyd stuff happening, and then Matt Hancock got questioned, he was like, "Yeah, we have diversity of thought." Like if you really had the diversity of thought, would you not have thought about that when you made these guidelines? And maybe thought, let's close the pubs, let's close the
Yeah,
restaurants, and let them
yeah,
do what they need to do. That would have been the other thing.
exactly. This is the same Matt Hancock who got asked, how many black cabinet members do you have? And
Yeah, that was him, and he said
um,
diversity
um,
of thought.
um, no, you have zero, mate, zero. And the thing is, they know they have zero, and this is what one of the things I was saying, like BAME as an umbrella term, people are using it as a get out clause, like, oh no, but we've got no. She asked the direct question, how many black people? And I've done the same to our council. They've gone back and they have, like, what did they say? They had 96% of their council members were, oh, sorry, who worked for the council were white, but they couldn't tell us the breakdown of the 4%.
Because
That's
the
just too
BAME.
much. BAME. I was like, no,
And
no.
we know
4%
BAME
to
means
work out.
aim. Literally,
It's just
whenever
like,
anyone says BAME to me, I'm like, you mean aim? That's
yeah,
it. Like,
exactly. Not, because that's what I shared, that meme that I was like, oh, so as a person of color, no, I'm black, blackity black. And 'cause that's what I am. And I
literally.
just feel, I wouldn't call you European. I wouldn't call, it's like someone calling someone from England, oh, British. No, people will like to be called, oh, I'm English. They don't want to be called British. Like, call us for what we are,
Yeah.
because then you can't hide from it.
And I think they're also like categorizing, because the thing is, everyone has their own views on being put under the label BAME or
Yeah,
BIPOC or however you want to say, or POC. Everyone has their own views and their own stance on it. But if it comes to statistics, you have to separate it. And that's one of the hardest things that we've kind of found on the back end when we've been doing research and stuff for the different teams we've got. And it's been a case of you'll look up something and it'll say BAME, da da da, and it will tell you, start talking about the BAME community and then say, so Asian statistic, it'll be like 56% da da da, and then the
yeah,
whole paragraph will be about Asians, but they
yeah,
started off saying BAMEs, and it's like, where's your information about black people? Just because
yeah.
you've researched Asians doesn't mean you've researched all of us.
No. And there's
And
differences between the two ethnicities anyway. Like, you know, um, children who are from an Asian background are more likely to do better at university, in higher education, compared to children from African, Caribbean background. So for us to all then be collaborate together, it just, as your little friend come in the room.
no, it was my sister.
Well, that's what I thought you like.
But it was a quiet little open, so I thought it might have been him. I was like, oh.
But yeah, I don't know. I just feel it can be a dangerous term because it doesn't look at your individuality as a ethnicity group.
Yeah, it doesn't. You're just grouping me together, and it could be anyone that you think from what you see from your eye point. It's not actually me. It might be
Non-white.
my
That's
people.
what it is. It's anyone who's non-white. That's just such
And
a,
it's even sometimes they'll think of it and be like, even if you're non-white, it's non-British.
yeah.
It's like the Eastern Europeans or even anyone else, like they'll fall under BAME because you're not British.
So who else can we put in that group? Oh, yeah.
I know. I've just noticed though. I got notifications in. We've got 1.5 minutes left. So
Okay.
yeah, wrap it up. Thank you for coming. It was nice speaking to
Thank
you.
you for inviting me.
It was perfect. Thank you. Like, just keep up the good work, and thank you for everything you're doing in Lancaster. And
Yeah, people
hopefully,
can follow us. We've got a Lancaster Black History Group on Facebook where we update events, projects that we're aiming to do, and articles that we will find which might find helpful. So you can follow
perfect.
us there.
You send me that. Is it Instagram and Facebook or just Facebook?
We've got Facebook only at the moment, but yeah, I'll send you the link as well.
Okay, well, perfect. Send me the Facebook, and people can find it through our Facebook group. I'll tag them in some stuff. And yeah, thanks for sharing your story and
Thank
being
you
with us
for
today.
inviting me.
I'll see you soon.
Mwah. See you later.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.